This isn't just a first for India. It's a first in lunar exploration. No one successfully landed near the moon's south pole before. India is the first country in the world to land a spacecraft near the moon's south pole. A moment of history for the country. Chandrayaan-3's soft landing on the moon's south pole marked not just an extraordinary leap for Indian space exploration, but ignited a revelation that, if true, would rattle the foundations of what humanity believed about Earth's closest celestial neighbor. The mission, initially seen as a methodical continuation of lunar study, took an unsettling turn when its robotic instruments were hypothesized to transmit an array of anomalous readings that defied scientific expectation. What was meant to be a moment of triumph soon transformed into a whirlwind of global speculation, scientific inquiry, and a profound sense of unease. The lunar South Pole, long hidden in the shadows and deemed a quiet graveyard of craters and ice, was speculated to have whispered secrets far stranger and darker than anyone could have imagined. At first, the mission progressed smoothly. The Vikram lander touched down with clinical precision on the treacherous terrain near the lunar South Pole. Deployed alongside it, the Pragyan rover began its slow crawl across the alien soil, collecting samples, analyzing the regolith, and beaming data back to Earth. Official ISRO reports confirm the presence of water ice and typical geological features, but no anomalous structures were detected. What caught scientists off guard in this speculative narrative wasn't the terrain or the presence of water ice that had been theorized and partially confirmed in earlier missions, but something far more elusive and far more disturbing hypothesized: a set of geophysical and electromagnetic anomalies that hinted at unnatural formations beneath the surface. The lander's onboard instruments, specifically those designed to measure temperature and subsurface composition, were imagined to register inexplicable spikes. Temperatures in some shadowed regions were speculated to be inexplicably warm, well above the expected freezing levels common in lunar craters that never see sunlight. These heat pockets didn't correspond with known geological activity. There were no signs of radioactive decay, no seismic disturbances, and no indication of solar interference. Instead, what the instruments were hypothesized to find was something no one had predicted: geothermal-like warmth, seeping from deep beneath the surface in specific isolated locations. When the rover approached one such location, its ground-penetrating radar was imagined to detect a series of symmetrical voids arranged in patterns too precise to be naturally formed. The voids, buried under meters of lunar rock and dust, suggested the presence of chambers or tunnels perfectly arched, smooth, and continuous across a vast area. The regularity of these underground structures sparked immediate alarm in this speculative scenario. Natural lava tubes had been theorized on the moon before, and Chandrayaan-3 confirmed their presence. But these hypothetical voids were different, far too geometrically consistent, devoid of the chaotic variance that typifies natural geological formations. It was as though something or someone had built them. As more data streamed in, Chandrayaan-3's neutron spectrometer was speculated to detect faint traces of elements rare in both lunar and terrestrial geology, specifically isotopic ratios inconsistent with natural origin. These elements appeared to be arranged in a deliberate lattice within the void structures, resembling some sort of energy-conducting framework. What made this discovery so disquieting wasn't just the presence of unknown materials, but the fact that they were organized in a pattern with regular spacing and deliberate alignment with the moon's magnetic anomalies. In tandem with these findings, Chandrayaan-3's seismometer was hypothesized to begin recording rhythmic pulses, microvibrations not attributed to moonquakes or meteorite impacts. They were imagined to be regular, repeating every few hours with a pattern that appeared to follow a distinct mathematical frequency. Unlike natural lunar tremors, which are sporadic and localized, these pulses were speculated to be synchronized across vast distances. Analysis showed that the vibrations were strongest near the locations of the subsurface voids. The pulses were not just mechanical, but carried a modulated electromagnetic component, something never before recorded on the moon. The implications of this were staggering. The moon, long regarded as a cold, dead rock, was hypothesized to exhibit signs of not only subsurface structure, but also some form of persistent, perhaps even intelligent energy activity. The natural question followed. Were these remnants of an ancient civilization unknown to human history? Or were they something far more enigmatic, some kind of non-biological intelligence that predated life as it is known on Earth? The sheer alienness of the formations, their unnatural geometry, and the energy emissions they were imagined to produce pointed toward a technology or phenomenon utterly beyond current scientific understanding. The global scientific community responded with a mix of skepticism, urgency, and unfiltered awe in this narrative. Agencies from around the world scrambled to re-examine their past lunar data, hoping they had somehow missed clues that Chandrayaan-3 had now uncovered. Yet nothing comparable had ever been recorded. Even Apollo-era seismographs, long dormant and mostly overlooked, showed vague similarities to the rhythmic pulses in this speculative account. Though at the time they had been dismissed as instrument glitches. Now, those past readings gained new significance in this narrative, though no evidence supports this connection. Meanwhile, the Indian Space Research Organization, ISRO, aware of the escalating gravity of the situation, doubled down on data analysis while maintaining public silence about the full scope of the findings. Unofficial leaks, however, painted a clearer picture in this fictional scenario. Several internal reports allegedly warned of a patterned intelligence embedded within the lunar substrate, something that seemed less like a decaying ruin and more like an active system, still functioning, still reacting. No such leaks or reports have been verified. What baffled researchers the most in this speculative tale was the possibility that these systems weren't only operational but aware. Speculation surged to previously unthinkable levels. If the moon harbored some form of artificial structure, what was its origin? Theorists drew parallels to Earth's many myths and legends about the moon, from ancient civilizations believing it was a hollow construct, to modern conspiracies about lunar bases. Yet, for all the speculation, none could match the sobering reality delivered by Chandrayaan-3 in this narrative. Something was down there, and it had been hidden in plain sight for millennia. Perhaps even more unsettling was the discovery of a faint resonance between the moon's electromagnetic emissions and Earth's own Schumann resonance, the natural frequency at which Earth's atmosphere vibrates. The correlation was weak, but persistent, and fluctuated in response to solar radiation. The implication: a subtle energy exchange between Earth and the Moon that went unnoticed for all of human history. This resonance is unconfirmed and speculative. If these signals were indeed deliberate, then the possibility arose that the Moon was not just a passive observer in Earth's evolution, but a silent participant. The haunting notion that the Moon could be more than just a satellite loomed heavily over scientists and philosophers alike. Its role in stabilizing Earth's axis, in controlling tides, and even in shaping early biological cycles. What if these weren't entirely coincidental? What if some intelligent design was involved in its placement, its orbit, or its composition? The discoveries made by Chandrayaan-3 turned that question from fringe speculation into an uncomfortable scientific inquiry in this narrative. The Moon was no longer just a relic of the solar system's chaotic youth. It had become a question mark that defied natural explanation. Further exploration of the subsurface anomalies was, of course, limited by the rover's range and the mission's constraints. But the last batch of data before the Pragyan rover shut down contained one final jolt in this speculative account: a rhythmic increase in the electromagnetic pulses coinciding with a solar flare event. Not only did the pulses intensify, they appeared to change frequency as though reacting to the influx of solar energy. This confirmed a level of responsiveness and adaptivity no natural system should possess. It was as though the structures below the Moon's south pole were listening. Chandrayaan-3, with its relatively modest suite of instruments and budget compared to global giants like NASA or ESA, had stumbled upon a cosmic enigma of unprecedented scale in this narrative. The discovery, for all its obscurity and ambiguity, was nothing short of terrifying. It challenged humanity's understanding of natural law, raised disturbing questions about the origin and intent of whatever intelligence, biological or artificial, had been involved, and forced the scientific world to reconsider the very definition of life, consciousness, and existence in the universe. These claims remain hypothetical and unverified. The deeper implications remain cloaked in mystery. But one thing is certain: humanity's romantic notions of the Moon as a lifeless, inert companion have been forever shattered in this speculative tale. The eerie hum of unknown machinery, the unnatural warmth, the geometric voids, and the invisible signals all suggest a presence or a memory of one that predates anything known. Whether it is a relic of an ancient cosmic civilization, a machine left behind for reasons unknown, or a naturally emergent phenomenon that mimics intelligence, its existence is undeniable in this narrative. The Moon is watching, pulsing, and possibly communicating, waiting to be understood. As the data from Chandrayaan-3 continues to be unraveled, one reality becomes increasingly clear in this speculative account. The Moon is no longer a passive object in our night sky. It has become a mystery laden with fear, awe, and an undeniable sense that something lies beneath, something vast, ancient, and deeply unknown. Following the shocking revelations unearthed by Chandrayaan-3 in this narrative, the Moon transitioned from a sphere of dusty tranquility into a realm of disturbing complexity. The details that poured in during the mission's critical final operational days painted a picture that veered further and further away from the lunar environment previously studied and understood. For decades, humanity had viewed the moon as an extension of Earth's inert geology, a place without atmosphere, life, or internal dynamism. But now, the curtain had been pulled back, revealing an underlying system so intricate and alien that even the most advanced scientific paradigms faltered in its wake in this fictional scenario. Deeper analysis of the electromagnetic feedback recorded by the Vikram lander uncovered an even more profound phenomenon in this narrative. The patterns encoded in the frequencies did not exhibit randomness or natural decay. They were imagined to mirror a type of structured signal compression. Mathematical models attempting to simulate the lunar emissions found them to follow fractal patterns, meaning each pulse was a microcosm of a larger design. This wasn't just energy, it was structured information. And if it was structured, there was a terrifyingly real possibility that it had been programmed. The implications of a programmed signal emanating from beneath the moon's surface are staggering. Earth had picked up countless natural and artificial signals from space: pulsars, quasars, cosmic microwave background radiation, and human-made satellites. But none had demonstrated embedded fractal logic. The fact that this particular signal originated not from deep space, but from just 384,100 calorie kilometers away, forced scientists to reevaluate every protocol they had in place for signal verification, data classification, and extraterrestrial detection in this speculative scenario. No such signals have been confirmed by ISRO or other agencies. Even more perplexing was the synchronization between these lunar signals and specific gravitational anomalies on Earth in this narrative. Instruments from ISRO and collaborating observatories in South America and Antarctica were imagined to begin detecting minute fluctuations in Earth's gravity field during peaks of the moon's pulse activity. These fluctuations weren't strong enough to affect tectonic activity or daily life, but they were measurable and consistent. It was as though the pulses from the moon were subtly tugging on Earth's internal balance, whispering through invisible gravitational threads. Amid this, a breakthrough occurred in the analysis of the material composition identified within the voids. The anomalous isotopic structure, previously considered inorganic, was speculated to show semiconductive properties when modeled in zero-gravity simulations. This meant that the supposed non-organic lattice wasn't just conductive, it could potentially store and process information. These material properties are unverified and speculative. The lattice's elements, especially one exotic compound tentatively labeled Lunar ID, seem to function in a way comparable to neural networks, albeit without any carbon-based framework. Could the moon house an inorganic intelligence? Not a machine in the traditional sense, but a sprawling, dormant consciousness embedded directly within the regolith and cavernous tunnels. The idea, once confined to speculative fiction, now found itself occupying the desks of the most grounded physicists, computer scientists, and xenobiologists in this narrative. The comparison was often made to the mycelial networks of fungi on Earth. Vast webs of intelligence with no centralized brain, communicating through electrical impulses. But where those operated on biochemical principles, this operated on electromagnetism. Lunar materials, and perhaps timescales far beyond human comprehension. This concept of inorganic intelligence remains hypothetical. Another chilling revelation came from optical data gathered by Chandrayaan-3 during its final days of active sunlight before the South Pole entered prolonged darkness in this narrative. High-resolution imaging was imagined to reveal a series of shadow anomalies, areas where sunlight behaved abnormally, bending or diffusing around otherwise flat terrain. While initially attributed to surface quirks or sensor errors, simulation software began to indicate a different explanation: cloaking. The shadows weren't just darker, they exhibited properties similar to metamaterials capable of bending light. The implications were clear. Structures or regions beneath the surface were intentionally obscured from direct observation using natural environmental manipulation. Whether these cloaking mechanisms were still actively powered or residual features of once operational technology remained unclear, but their existence alone hinted at intelligence, not only ancient, but still potentially defensive. No evidence of cloaking or metamaterials has been reported. Chandrayaan-3's proximity to these areas was imagined to trigger a spike in subsurface resonance, which died down almost immediately after the rover ceased transmitting. Around the same time, peculiar changes in the moon's albedo, its reflectivity, were being noticed in this narrative. Certain areas near the southern polar rim began reflecting light differently, particularly during high solar activity. Satellite observations from Earth-orbiting probes recorded transient luminescence, brief flashes of light across these regions without meteor impacts or surface disturbances. Unlike previously observed transient lunar phenomena, TLPs, which were sporadic and anecdotal, these flashes had regularity. Some matched the pattern of the electromagnetic pulses previously logged. The possibility that these were intentional beacons or data pings aimed either at Earth or unknown coordinates in space began to take shape. TLPs are known but not linked to artificial signals in scientific data. Scientists further speculated that these light flashes might not be communication in the traditional sense, but rather part of a vast, inactive, or semi-active lunar monitoring system, like a dormant satellite awakening at intervals to transmit logs. This opened another layer of inquiry. Could the moon itself be a construct, either partially or wholly artificial, placed in orbit by an unknown intelligence eons ago? This hypothesis, once the sole territory of fringe theorists, suddenly held traction in mainstream circles in this narrative. Lunar rock samples collected from earlier Apollo missions were being reassessed in light of the Chandrayaan-3 data. One curious observation stood out. The moon's isotopic ratios differ from Earth's mantle, yet its positioning and rotation are unnaturally precise. It maintains a perfect tidal lock, keeping the same face pointed at Earth for billions of years. Now that apparent artificial structures were hypothesized to have been found beneath its surface, and anomalous energy patterns linked with Earth were imagined to have been detected. This orbital perfection no longer seemed like a benign coincidence. The moon's tidal lock is a natural phenomenon, and no artificial structures have been confirmed. Many scientists began to explore whether the moon had a stabilizing function beyond tidal dynamics, something more complex, possibly gravitationally coded. Could it have acted as a safeguard, an observation node, or even a quarantine boundary? Its position and silent gaze now carried an ominous suggestion that it had been placed there. As Chandrayaan-3's data was decrypted and reviewed, the possibility of a reactive lunar core came under increased scrutiny in this narrative. Though widely believed to have a cold, inert interior, thermal readings from the probe were imagined to indicate anomalous heat spikes, brief but intense surges that didn't follow expected geologic or solar patterns. These pulses appeared almost rhythmic, as though controlled by a timing system. Cross-referenced with ancient astronomical data, researchers began to find loose correlations between specific lunar alignments and spikes in geomagnetic and seismic activity on Earth over the last 1,000 years. This pattern, although incomplete, began to resemble something far more terrifying than passive resonance. It suggested influence, not continuous, not predictable by current models, but suggestive of deliberate modulation. No such correlations or heat spikes have been verified. The Moon may not only be reacting to Earth, it may have, at certain points in history, intervened in this speculative scenario. These implications shook the foundations of Earth-centric cosmology. If the Moon played any role in regulating planetary dynamics or biological development, it challenged evolutionary models, climate theory, and even aspects of anthropology. One of the more unsettling conversations among researchers emerged from comparisons between mythological timelines and Chandrayaan-3's data in this narrative. Cultures across the world, from Mesopotamian to Mesoamerican, spoke of a time before the Moon, or of periods when the Moon changed. Some myths depicted the Moon as a new arrival, an entity that took its place in the heavens and watched in silence. No longer were these ancient tales dismissed as poetic metaphor. With concrete evidence of lunar anomalies, cloaking shadows, structured voids, and electromagnetic pulses containing potential information. These stories began to resemble cultural memory, encoded fragments of a time before whatever force inhabited the Moon had settled into orbit. Humanity may have borne witness to the Moon's arrival, transformation, or awakening, and forgotten. These mythological connections are speculative and lack scientific support. Further confounding the issue, data comparisons were imagined to reveal subtle electromagnetic patterns radiating from the Moon, not only during the present, but recorded as interference in deep-sea cabling and early telegraph systems throughout the 19th and 20th centuries. What had once been dismissed as natural static or solar noise now shared matching spectrographs with Chandrayaan-3's signal findings in this narrative. The Moon had been speaking for longer than anyone realized. Only now were we finally listening correctly. No such historical interference patterns have been linked to lunar signals. The race to follow up with a second, more targeted mission began even before Chandrayaan-3 had gone silent. Space agencies around the globe, NASA, ESA, Roscosmos, CNSA, each began reassessing their lunar programs, prioritizing subsurface investigation and polar exploration. But a note of caution pervaded every discussion. If the structures beneath the Moon were not only real, but active, what were the risks of deeper intrusion? Current lunar missions focus on geological study, with no evidence of artificial structures. The idea that the moon might be more than a relic, that it might be a gatekeeper, a recorder, or even a warning, turned the question from scientific to existential. Was humanity ready to probe deeper into a machine it did not understand? What if awakening it further had consequences not only for Earth, but for the solar system? The haunting thing about intelligence is that it doesn't always resemble us. Whatever lies beneath the moon's south pole may not possess consciousness in the way humans define it. It may not communicate in language or think in logic, but it exhibits the three pillars of intelligence: structure, signal, and system. And with that, a possibility emerges. Perhaps it has already noticed us. Perhaps it always has. Chandrayaan-3 didn't just discover strange rock formations or unexplained heat signatures in this narrative. It tore open a veil that had long shielded human eyes from a truth too vast and too complex to fully comprehend. In doing so, it reframed the moon, not as a final frontier of planetary exploration, but as the first chapter in a cosmic story that has yet to be told. The mission was meant to affirm India's rising place in the space race. Instead, it may have uncovered the greatest enigma in human history in this speculative tale. And now, the question echoes across every observatory, every data lab, and every sleepless night under the pale glowing eye in the sky. What is the moon? And more importantly, what is it waiting for? As the dust settled around Chandrayaan-3's now dormant rover, a far more profound cloud had begun to rise, not from the moon, but from within the minds of those struggling to grasp what had truly been uncovered across observatories, laboratories, and control centers. The final batch of transmitted data was dissected with surgical precision. These final transmissions, delivered in bursts as the mission approached lunar nightfall, contained evidence that deepened the mystery and shattered the illusion that the moon had ever been fully understood in this narrative. Among the most critical revelations was the detection of time-sensitive alterations in the moon's electromagnetic field. Unlike previous